I call on the Canadian Federation of Students, Ontario, to come forward, please. Good afternoon. You have 10 minutes for your presentation, and there may be 5 minutes of questioning following that. And please identify yourselves for the purposes of our recording. Hansard.
Sure. Hello, committee members. Thank you for agreeing to hear from the Canadian Federation of Students today. My name is Jen Hassam, and I'm the Ontario chair of our federation. And beside me is James Beaton, who is our provincial researcher. The Canadian Federation of Students represents over 500,000 students from across Canada, with 300,000 college and university students represented in Ontario alone. Today, I'm here to discuss with you the state of our current post-secondary education system and the students within it. We have also handed out our pre-election position paper, which contains policy and research, and a copy of my presentation today. And today, I'll be talking about 3 things. And I also have recommendations. They include funding, tuition fees, and system design. And I will begin by reviewing why post-secondary education is one of the most important priorities for your government. More than serving as a critical tool for personal empowerment and social development, our post-secondary institutions also power Ontario's economy. Ontario receives 150% return on its investment in post-secondary education. Over 400,000 jobs are directly or indirectly tied to Ontario's universities. And since over 70% of new listed jobs require post-secondary education, this number is going to grow. Post-secondary education isn't an option for students anymore. It's a necessity. The benefits are many on an individual and social level. Increasingly, a post-secondary education is needed just to obtain an average income. And productively employed, well-paid graduates not only hold jobs, but create jobs and economic opportunities for other Ontarians. And the higher income of graduates provides increased funds for the provincial tax base that governments can use to support local and provincial programs, which benefits all citizens. But despite all of these important considerations, Ontario's funding for post-secondary education is the 3rd worst in Canada. And this has resulted in some of the highest tuition fees and graduation debt loads in the country. For example, in the past 15 years, tuition fees have increased 4 times the rate of inflation. And graduates with mortgage-sized debt loads delay in starting families, purchasing cars, purchasing houses, which not only diminishes their own quality of life, but this undermines Ontario's economic advantage. The Reaching Higher plan, which was touted as the solution for years of government underfunding, will leave Ontario well below the national standard of funding by the time it runs out in 2010. In fact, according to the Council of Ontario Universities, once we account for inflation and enrollment growth, we are actually further behind under the Reaching Higher plan. What are the results of this underfunded post-secondary system? They include increased fees, climbing student debt, bulging classrooms, and deteriorating infrastructure. These problems we will still grapple with today, even after Reaching Higher. The Reaching Higher strategy for higher fees and higher student debt plans indefinite tuition fee increases of about 5% is the average. But the fees for some programs are going to be much higher than others. Take, for example, some graduate programs and professional degrees will experience tuition fee increases of 36% every 4 years. International students continue to face complete uncertainty with indefinite tuition fee increases year in and year out under a deregulated system. A significant portion of Ontarians are deeply concerned about the lack of opportunities available for themselves and their families under the current system. According to a recent Harris Decima poll, 88% of Ontarians think that tuition fees should be reduced or frozen. The same poll revealed that 2/3 of Ontarians said that lowering tuition fees and student debt should be the #1 priority for the Ministry of Training, Colleges and Universities. The Canadian Federation of Students looks to a two-level solution to stopping the tuition fee increases. Luckily, the federal Conservatives have already begun to recognize the importance of taking this on as a serious issue, because in the 2007 budget, there is an extra $800 million for post-secondary education in the 2008 budget. $315 million will be Ontario's share. Taken on its own, this single injection from the federal government is well enough to roll tuition fees back to the 2004-2005 levels next year. And with this, we recommend creating a fee increase protection fund with this federal money. But we also think that Ontario can go a long ways in helping out and should also contribute the welfare of post-secondary education and the students within it by contributing to this proposed fund. In fact, we're calling on the Minister of Finance to ensure that any underspending within the Ministry of Training Colleges and Universities is transferred to this fund. So for example, according to last year's estimates, that amount would have realized in $100 million being contributed to that fund. But tuition fees are not the only problem that students are facing. Ancillary fees constitute some of the fastest growing fees in colleges and universities. Between 1996 and 2004, college ancillary revenues jumped by 240%. Ancillary fees now make up 1/4 of the fees that college students pay. And unfortunately, some of these ancillary fees being collected are in direct contravention to the Ontario government's own binding policy. And that is why there is currently a class action lawsuit against the colleges that has been lodged by students, which seeks to reclaim $200 million of fees that were illegally collected from students and their families over the course of 4 years. Therefore, we call upon Ontario to offset this illegal stream of revenue by injecting $50 million into the college system immediately and ensuring the government and college administrators adhere to their own binding policy. Students across Ontario are also concerned about transparency and accountability in the government and the post-secondary education system. In other provinces, most notably British Columbia, implementation of generally accepted accounting practices has resulted in the inclusion of college and university revenue into provincial budgets. Students believe that there are a number of advantages when adopting this practice in Ontario. One significant rationale is that it makes public institutions, which are regulated by the government in many different ways, accountable to the government itself through the budgetary process. The Federation also recommends a number of system design changes to improve the efficiency of our post-secondary education system. Credit transfer between institutions is very difficult right now, but because there are almost no system-wide mechanisms for credit transfer between colleges and universities. And increasing mobility between colleges and universities would establish clear pathways, thereby reducing costs for students by moving them through the system more efficiency and with more flexibility. In jurisdictions where transfer credit systems exist, savings for the system are realized by shorter times to completion for students. The Federation estimates that improvements in credit transfer would save the system roughly $100 million a year alone in government grants by just allowing students to apply for some of their credits to secondary degrees. The total cumulative savings to students is also rather large, at, according to us, $40 million a year. So, in summary, the current government promotes Reaching Higher as the most significant investment in education in over 40 years. And while this new investment is welcome, Reaching Higher's impact fails in making up for the years of underfunding and will only bring Ontario up from second last in the country to middle of the pack. We think that Ontarians deserve more than mediocrity. And while our institutions are treading water and students are drowning in tuition fees and growing student debt, we've touched upon what needs to happen in this presentation. And in Reaching Higher, we urge the committee and the government to listen to the message from students. who are the most experienced as activists. And if you would like to be an activist government in addressing poverty, then your policies on post-secondary education must also challenge poverty by reducing tuition fees and providing equal opportunity for all Ontarians. And we thank you for your time and look forward to submitting our detailed written report later this month and your questions following the presentation.
Thank you. This round of questioning goes to the government. Mr. Arthurs.
Mr. Chairman, my question is so, and there may be some other members of our caucus who may want to ask a question as well, but particularly on the commentary in respect to the federal government, and I'm going to take it directly out of your presentation. They have a two-level solution to stopping the tuition fee increases. Luckily, the federal Conservatives have already begun to recognize the importance of taking on this serious challenge. The 2007 budgeted for an extra $800 million for post-secondary education in the 2008 budget year. $350 million would be for Ontario's share. Do you believe that Jim Flaherty's intention as the federal finance minister in providing additional monies for universities, a share of $315 million for Ontario, was intended for tuition freezes or tuition decreases, given Mr. Flaherty's fiscal, he'll call himself about the farthest right fiscal conservative you're going to find. Do you really think it was his intention in providing additional money into the system that it be used for freezes or reducing tuitions?
Well, I don't necessarily think that the tuition fee issue is an ideological issue. We have seen provinces under Conservative governments reduce tuition fees. And I know, as well as everyone else in the room, that this is a provincial arena. And so it is up to the provinces to decide how they are going to use those federal monies. So really it's in the name of post-secondary education, but it is up to the members yourselves to decide how to invest it. We're recommending that you invest it to students to help with the current tuition fee increases. Okay, so in fact, I think what you're saying is you appreciate and recognize the federal government's engagement in the process, but in my words, I wouldn't think Jim Flaherty would be interested in tuition decreases or freezes as such. That's really my one particular question. I understand what you're saying. I've had my children through college, university systems. I still there's obviously a shared responsibility as much as families can do that with their children to help support them on their way through. I guess the other thing I would ask, I'm particularly interested in the systemic changes you're talking about, and that's credit transfers, both between colleges, between college and university, and I'm not hearing much about credit exchanges between universities because they're such independent organizations when they're set up. But I know as a parent, when my kids were going through college, university, one who's just finished recently, it would have been such a bonus if there had been a higher degree of flexibility, capacity to move those credits around. It would have helped with the financial burden. Yep. Because it would have meant that they could have spent a couple of years in one location and maybe finished off their degree closer to home or started closer to home and gone somewhere else to finish it. Apart from the broad experience they might have gained more so than they were able to achieve in the time they had. Do you want to comment a little more on this systemic issue of credit exchange or credit equivalencies, which I guess is in addition to an exchange strategy? Sure. Basically, what we have been modeling our position on system design on is systems that exist in British Columbia as well as in Alberta, where every single post-secondary course is actually evaluated, and therefore there is better flexibility and efficiency within the system if you switch from college to college, university to university, university to college, and college to university. And that way, it eliminates duplication. So often, students will complete a college degree or go midway, same things with universities, and do an exchange. And there shouldn't be any kinds of duplication whereby, for example, a friend of mine who went to Algonquin College in Ottawa would then apply to Carleton University and Ottawa University. And her one sociology credit, which she obtained at Algonquin, was worth the equivalent of one sociology credit at the University of Ottawa, but only half at Carleton. So why is there this sort of system, well, or lack of system, when what we could be doing is having a system much like in British Columbia, whereby quite often students will pay almost half the tuition fees and attend a college in their hometown and attend it for 2 years, and then transfer to a larger university institution to finish up the remainder of the credits. So it's also not just a question of duplication and flexibility, but it's also an access issue, because students from more rural areas are 6 times less as likely to attend a university than those who live in urban areas. Tuition fees are also a barrier, and student debt. And having the ability to pay half, as well as to live at home in your own community, because a lot of community colleges are spread geographically throughout the province, and we think that this would be a really good way to address some of these issues is through a credit transfer system.
Thank you, and thank you for your presentation.